I love suffering. It brings me so close to God. This is a quote by the Indian saint Neem Karoli Baba Maharaji, who became popular in the United States through being Ram Dass's guru. And so I will repeat the quote one more time. It says, I love suffering. It brings me so close to God. And I can't pretend to fathom the full depths of the meaning of this phrase, as I definitely do not have the vision, insight, and knowledge of Maharaji, who is a completely enlightened being who was and is one with God. So I can't claim to have the full understanding that he did of the term, but from as deep as I've been able to get, it seems to me, one, that there's vast suffering in the world. There's vast pain, and to anyone that has a bit of care or awareness, it's pretty obvious that there's human beings, animals, plants, and all life on earth contains mental and physical suffering at some point. Deadly diseases, starvation, pain, and daily life, mental anguish, depression, anxiety, murder of plants, animals, anything, terrorism, fights, war, losing, adultery, ending of relationships, day-to-day troubles, anything, to pains in the body, heart disease, liver failure, anything, whether inside, outside, attachments of our mind that causes pain. There's tons of suffering in the world. And we usually do our best kind of to avoid it. We want things that are joyful. Nobody's like, oh, I'm suffering really badly or in pain, and people usually aren't like, oh, that's really good for you. I'm so happy to hear about your suffering. It's when people say they're happy that usually we're like, oh, great, you're happy. It's never like, oh, great, you're suffering. It takes a really far out perspective of being like Ram Dass or like Maharaji to tell you that your suffering is God's grace, that your suffering is bliss, that your suffering is something that you should be grateful for. And the reason suffering is said to bring us so close to God is because that's the time that we look towards the spiritual. The suffering is the times when we get on our hands and knees and pray. Suffering is the time when we're humbled, when we've been humiliated and we get humble. Suffering is the time when we push through those boundaries of what we think we are, how we think it is. Not always, and like it takes vast suffering to awaken, but that is, even Yogananda, the famous saint, he had a discourse with Ramana Maharshi, another saint in India, and he asked, why the suffering? And he said it is so people can awaken to God, or to their oneness with the universe. And he said, but can't it be another way? Why does it have to be through suffering? And he said, this is the way. So suffering's built into the fabric of form, of existence. There's never going to be, as long as there's form, as long as there's the mother, as long as there's manifested reality, there's going to be suffering inherent in such reality. Maybe at times more, maybe at times less. It comes and it goes, but the suffering is inherent. And so it's not about, we try to relieve it in ourselves and others, but we also have to see, like, when suffering comes down the pike, like when suffering is what we get. And I get a lot of suffering in my life, maybe not to proportions of others, but like our own suffering proportionate to ourselves is a big deal. To not matter how much suffering someone else is going through, but however much suffering I'm going to is very, very real to me. And so there is different levels and extents of it, and most of it, other than physical pain, but even physical pain or disease still has a lot to do with the mind. A lot of suffering depends on my attachments and expectations, because in reality I suffer because I expect things to be some way different than how they are. I don't accept things how they are. I expect to be treated in a certain way, looked at a certain way. I expect other people to treat others and look at other things in a certain way. It's all, like it says in the AA literature, acceptance is the answer to all my problems today. When I'm disturbed, it's because I lack acceptance. And this is very true. But when it does come to suffering, and I don't have perfect acceptance, I'm not a Maharaji that sees joy and suffering as one and the same. I'm I see it after now because I've done a lot of spiritual work. Like the moments after my pain, the day after, I'm like, oh, thank you, God, for that. Like whatever that was teaching me, because suffering can be seen as a fire of purification. It's called tapas in Hinduism, or austerity, that burns out your impurities and brings you closer to God. But it's so hard to see in the moment. But that includes going through pain and hurting and not thinking something's wrong with it. And really, if you could be grateful in the moment for the pain, which is extremely difficult, that is such a great door into the spirit. And so that's why Maharaji says, to the extent that I can understand it, I love suffering. It brings me so close to God. And he still did many good deeds. It wasn't that he refused to help people, but he lives in that place where he could see the reason things are why they are, and why certain things unfold certain ways in the universe. So it's just that we don't want to have such a superficial level of understanding about these matters. We want to be able to look at them and take them a little bit deeper, and at one point maybe you will be able to say that you are or have been grateful for your suffering, because it started to wake you up, and it's helped you refine you and continue your journey. Like Rumi says in his poetry, it's not the big bulky double end of the needle that gets through the hole. Like it's the pointed fine down pointed end, fine pointed end that is that is perfected to that little point to where it can get through. So it's like us being cut away, like the layers of a onion being peeled away to the core. It's like all these things that we think we are, all these conceptions and stuff like that. The fire of suffering and purification burns them away, and so sometimes those who suffer more, it can be led more quickly into God's grace. So it's just interesting that everything on the worldly level isn't always as it seems. Those that are free from pain and suffering might not be getting the growth from someone who has taken an incarnation with a curriculum that is filled with suffering. So it's just things to keep in mind as you continue on your own journey and continue on your own work. And it could really help relieve pain in itself, just knowing and holding this wisdom perspective in mind.
And now here's a break with a message from our sponsors. Are you tired of paying too much to H&R Block or others to prepare your tax return? Are you finally done pulling your hairs out over TurboTax or worrying about whether you completed your Form 1040 correctly? Well, worry no longer. With Momcilovic Tax and Accounting, you're in great hands. With over 35 years of experience and over 250 clients to show for, CPA Mile Momcilovic is the accountant you can trust. Straightforward, inexpensive, professional. All it takes is 3 easy steps. Step 1. Email or text us for more information. Step 2. Receive an invite email to load your data. Step 3. Review and sign your returns electronically in a safe and secure way. The best part about it, he can do your taxes and accounting no matter what state you're in. If you want a knowledgeable licensed expert, he is your guy, with tax returns starting at $125 for single filers and $150 for joint filers. You are guaranteed a fair price and excellent service. Stop the worrying and leave it up to the professional. Email Mile at info@momcilovicaccounting.com, text him at 773-578-0996, or go to momcilovicaccounting.com. Website link and contact information can be found in the description below. To learn more, follow Momcilovic Tax and Accounting on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn. Also, if you have any tax or accounting related questions, feel free to contact Mile free of charge. Start your journey of a stress-free tax season today.